The dashcam footage did not just ruin one career, it set an entire corrupt police department ablaze. It begins with silence, only the hum of tires on wet asphalt and the ragged breathing of a man who realizes far too late that he is the prey, not the predator. Officer Vance Harlan believed he was the law on that lonely stretch of highway. He thought the badge on his chest granted him the power of a god, but when he flicked off the safety of his Glock and aimed it at the woman in the sedan, he did not see an FBI agent. He saw a target. He was wrong, and moments later, the hunter became the hunted. The rain in Georgia does not wash things clean. It only makes the dirt cling tighter. Late one night, the humidity hung so thick, it felt like wearing a damp coat. Inside a charcoal gray Chevrolet Tahoe, Special Agent Naomi Brooks adjusted the rearview mirror, her eyes scanning the empty road behind her. She was exhausted after a long conference, followed by an intense briefing that had dragged on until the last drop of coffee was gone. All she wanted was to reach her temporary rental, take a hot shower, and collapse into bed for a solid stretch of sleep. She was not in uniform that night. She wore civilian clothes, a dark navy hoodie, jeans, and sneakers. At first glance, or through a prejudiced lens, she looked nothing like the assistant special agent in charge of the Southeast Division. She did not look like the woman who had dismantled cartels in Miami or negotiated hostage situations in Washington, D.C. She simply looked like a black woman driving a nice car alone on a dark road in the Deep South. Naomi reached for the water bottle in the cup holder when the interior of her car suddenly exploded with flashing blue and red lights. She sighed, a sharp sound of annoyance more than fear. She checked her speedometer. She had been driving exactly at the limit. Her registration was current. Her taillights worked. She knew this game. She had played it from both sides of the badge, though usually she was the one correcting officers who played it poorly. She signaled, slowed smoothly, and pulled onto the gravel shoulder. The gravel crunched loudly beneath her tires as the vehicle came to a stop. Behind her, the patrol car's spotlight blazed into her side mirror, momentarily blinding her. It was an aggressive tactic meant to disorient the driver, to make her squint, to make her look guilty. Naomi did not flinch. She placed both hands on the steering wheel, fingers spread wide and clearly visible. As she lowered the window, she caught the silhouette of the officer approaching in the side mirror. He was burly, broad-shouldered, moving with the swagger of a man who was bored and looking for something to break. His hand already rested on the grip of his holstered service weapon. Naomi's internal radar blared. Aggressive posture, no caution on approach, too comfortable, far too comfortable. The officer stopped at the B-pillar, just behind her line of sight, forcing her to turn her head awkwardly to see him. Another control tactic. He controlled the angle, he controlled the subject. License and registration. His voice was rough, stripped of the polite, "Good evening," the manual demanded. Naomi turned slightly. The nameplate on his uniform read Harlan. He looked a little under 40, with a buzz cut and a face carved from red clay and resentment. His eyes were hard, sweeping the interior of her car, lingering on the back seat, the glove box, anywhere but her face. "Good evening, officer," Naomi said, her voice calm and professional. "I am going to reach for my purse on the passenger seat to get my identification. Is that all right?" Harlan did not answer right away. He leaned closer, the smell of stale tobacco and mint gum invading the car. "Whose car is this?" "It is mine," Naomi said, keeping her hands on the wheel. "Officer, did I have permission to retrieve my identification?" "I asked you a question," he snapped, tightening his grip on his belt. "This is a $50,000 truck. You expect me to believe a girl like you owns a vehicle like this? You the girlfriend of some rapper? Or daddy loan you the car?" Naomi's expression did not change, but her eyes turned to ice. This was not a traffic stop. This was a fishing expedition. "My name is Naomi Brooks. I am the registered owner. If you run the plates, you will see that. Why did you pull me over?" Harlan let out a low, ugly chuckle. "You swerved. I saw you cross the double yellow line back there. Suspicion of DUI. Now step out of the vehicle." "I have not been drinking, and I did not cross the line," Naomi stated firmly. "I have a dash cam that records forward and rear telemetry. It will confirm I stayed in my lane." The mention of the camera made Harlan falter for a split second. His eyes flicked to the windshield, spotting the small, discreet lens of the black box hidden behind the rearview mirror. Most officers would have backed down then. They would have muttered a warning and let her go. But Vance Harlan was not most officers. He was a man who had spent years in this county doing whatever he wanted, shielded by a sheriff who played golf with the judge. The camera did not scare him. It insulted him. It challenged his authority. "Step out of the vehicle," he growled, unsnapping his holster, "or I will drag you out." Naomi calculated the variables. She was armed. Her Glock 19 sat in a holster on her right hip, concealed by the hoodie. If she stepped out and he saw the outline of the weapon, he would shoot. He was already primed for violence. She could see the adrenaline tremors in his jaw. "Officer Harlan," she said, lowering her voice an octave and slipping into the command tone she used when breaching a compound. "I am a federal agent. My credentials are in my purse. I am armed, and my weapon is on my right hip. I will not exit this vehicle until we de-escalate the situation." Harlan stared for a second. Silence hung heavy between them, broken only by the drumming of the rain. Then he laughed. It was not a nervous laugh, it was a genuine bark of amused disbelief. "Federal agent," he sneered, glancing down the empty road as if sharing the joke with the ghosts in the trees. "Seriously? And I'm the King of England. You think I haven't heard that one before? You people always have a story. I know the mayor, I'm a lawyer, I'm a federal. Save it for the judge, sweetheart." "Officer Harlan, listen to me very carefully." "No, you listen to me," he roared, losing control. He yanked the door open. "Get out!" Naomi did not move. "I am identifying myself as a law enforcement officer. If you touch me, you are assaulting a federal agent." Harlan did not care. He leaned in, seizing her left arm in a vice grip and trying to haul her from the seat. Naomi braced her legs, using the leverage of the vehicle to stay put. She did not strike back yet. She did not know the camera was still rolling. She needed him to commit fully. She needed irrefutable proof that he was the aggressor. "Last warning," he shouted. He released her arm and stepped back, his hand flying to his hip. In one fluid motion, Officer Vance Harlan drew his service weapon and leveled it at Naomi Brooks's chest. The barrel of a .45 looks significantly larger when it is pointed straight at your sternum. Time did not stop for Naomi, but it slowed. It was the phenomenon known as tachypsychia. She saw the scratch on the slide of his gun. She saw the dilated pupils in his eyes. She saw the absolute unhinged certainty that he was about to kill her and get away with it. "Hands up! Hands up!" he screamed. He was hyperventilating. His finger was on the trigger. He had already broken the first rule of firearm safety. He was ready to destroy something he had not identified. Naomi slowly raised her hands, palms toward the windshield. "Okay," she said, her voice steady, cutting through his panic. "I have my hands up. Look at me, Harlan. Look at my face. I am not a threat to you. Lower the weapon. Shut up." He circled slightly, moving toward the front of the car for a better angle while keeping the gun trained on her. "You move 1 inch and I drop you. Do you hear me? I drop you." "I hear you," Naomi replied, "but you are making a mistake you cannot undo. My badge is in the purse. Just look at it." "I don't care about your fake badge," he spat. He was shaking now. The power rush mixed with fear. Not fear of her, but fear that the situation was spiraling. He needed to regain control. Kick the door open. Get on the ground face down. Now. Naomi knew they had reached the tipping point. If she got on the ground, he would cuff her. If he cuffed her, he would find the gun. Once he found the gun, he would panic, claim she had reached for it, and put 2 rounds in the back of her head. It was a narrative she had seen in case files a dozen times. Suspect attempted to draw a weapon. Officer feared for his life. She could not go to the ground. "I am not getting on the ground, Harlan," she said, keeping her hands raised. "I am telling you for the last time, I am Special Agent Naomi Brooks, FBI, badge number 8944. My supervisor is Assistant Special Agent in Charge Marcus Hale. If you pull that trigger, there is no hole deep enough for you to hide in." Something about the precise badge number made Harlan pause for a single heartbeat. The fog of his rage cleared just enough for a seed of doubt to slip in. Badge number. It sounded rehearsed, clear, but she was not screaming, not begging. She was speaking to him the way a teacher scolds a small child. "You are lying," he whispered, but the gun lowered an inch. "Check the purse," Naomi said. "Left hand, I will move it slowly. You keep the weapon on me. If I grab anything else, do what you have to do, but check the purse." He hesitated, licked his lips, glanced down the still empty road, slowly. Naomi moved her left hand with agonizing slowness toward the passenger seat. She hooked a finger around the strap of her leather bag and dragged it across the console. She opened the flap. Right on top, in a leather credential holder, lay the gold shield. Beside it was her photo identification card, laminated with bold capital letters, Federal Bureau of Investigation. She turned the wallet toward him. The dome light caught the gold. It gleamed bright against the gloom of the night. Harlan squinted and leaned in. The gun was still raised, but his posture slumped slightly. He saw the seal. He saw the photo. It was her, the woman in the car. He looked at the badge, then at her, and then, incredibly, the arrogance returned. He let out a short, disbelieving snort. He holstered his weapon, but offered no apology. He did not step back. He crossed his arms and leaned against the doorframe. A mocking smile played on his lips. "Well, I'll be damned," he said, shaking his head. "You really went and got yourself some props? That's cute. Where'd you buy it? A costume shop?" Naomi stared at him, stunned by the sheer density of his denial. "Excuse me?" He laughed again, this time a condescending, mocking sound. "I have seen these before. You think flashing some brass is going to make me salute? You are a civilian, sweetheart, and you are in a lot of trouble. Impersonating a federal agent? That's a serious felony. I will add it to the DUI. He reached for the radio on his shoulder. "Dispatch, this is Unit 4 Alpha. I have a combative suspect, black female, requesting a tow. And get this, she has a fake FBI badge. Yeah, I am going to need a transport cage. She is going to county." Naomi watched him speak into the radio. A strange calm settled over her. It was the calm at the eye of the storm. He had just called it in. It was recorded. He had confirmed the stop, the suspect, and his intent to arrest her. He had sealed his own fate. Naomi slowly lowered her hands. She glanced at the digital clock on the dashboard. "You making a call?" Harlan asked, still smiling. "Yeah, I am calling your ride to jail." "Good," Naomi said softly. She reached for the center console, not for her badge, but for her phone. It was already connected to the car's Bluetooth. "Because I am making a call too." "Who are you calling?" he sneered. "Your lawyer?" Naomi dialed a speed dial number. It rang once. "No," she said, locking eyes with him. "I am calling the cavalry." The voice on the other end answered instantly. It was crisp, alert, and terrifyingly serious. "Brooks, this is Atlanta Field Office Command. Why is your panic beacon active?" Harlan froze. He heard the voice through the car speakers. It did not sound like a lawyer. It did not sound like a boyfriend. It sounded like a tactical operations center. "Identify," Naomi said clearly, still staring at Harlan. "Agent in distress. I have an armed hostile at my window. Local police. Officer Vance Harlan, Jericho County. He has drawn his weapon. He is attempting an illegal arrest. He has refused to acknowledge federal credentials. I am requesting immediate assistance." "Copy, Agent Brooks." The voice boomed, filling the cabin. "We have your GPS coordinates. We have a tactical team returning from the interstate operation. 4 minutes out. Helicopter is 2 minutes out. Highway patrol is being notified to shut down the route. Do not engage unless fired upon. Help is on the way." Harlan's face drained from deep red to a sickly gray in the space of 3 seconds. He looked at the radio in his hand, then at the sky. In the distance, over the sound of the rain, came the rhythmic thump-thump of rotors slicing the air. Naomi smiled. It was a cold, sharp smile. "You hear that, officer?" she asked. "That is not from eBay. The sound of a helicopter at close range is not just noise. It is physical pressure. It vibrates in the chest, rattles the teeth, and turns the air into a chaotic cyclone of water and wind." Officer Vance Harlan stood frozen on the shoulder of the highway, hand still clutching his radio, face turned upward toward the blinding white column of light that had just descended from the heavens. The spotlight from the Bell 429 Global Ranger pinned him to the asphalt like an insect under a microscope. The rain now whipped sideways, stung by the rotor turbulence, lashing Harlan's face. He squinted, trying to shield his eyes, but there was nowhere to look. The darkness of the Georgia night had been annihilated. Then the ground units arrived. They did not come with howling sirens. They came with speed and precision. 4 black Chevrolet Suburbans rounded the curve, engines roaring, tires biting into the wet gravel. They boxed in Harlan's patrol car and Naomi's Tahoe in a tactical formation known as a hard seal. Doors flew open before the vehicles had fully stopped. Federal agents poured out. "Drop the radio! Hands on your head now!" The voices were amplified, overlapping, and terrifyingly aggressive. Men and women in heavy tactical gear, vests, plate carriers, ballistic helmets, carbines raised, flooded the scene. Bold yellow letters spelling FBI were stenciled across their backs and chests. Harlan stumbled backward, boots slipping in the mud off the shoulder. His brain could not process the visual data. 2 minutes ago he had been the apex predator on a lonely road. Now he stared down the barrels of 6 HK-416 rifles. "I am a cop!" he shouted, his voice thin and strained against the roar of the helicopter. "I am with Jericho County. You have the wrong guy." A green laser dot danced impassively across his chest. He did not drop voluntarily. His knees buckled. He fell hard onto the wet gravel, sharp stones digging into his shins. He dropped the radio. It fell uselessly into a puddle. "Hands behind your back. Interlace your fingers." 2 agents were on him instantly. One drove a knee into the small of his back, forcing the air from his lungs in a pained grunt. The other seized his wrists, twisting them behind him with no regard for his rotator cuffs. Click, click, click. The sound of handcuffs closing is a sound Harlan had heard 1,000 times. He had loved that sound. It was the sound of victory. It was the sound of power. But hearing it from this angle, with his cheek pressed to the mud and the smell of exhaust in his nose, it sounded like the closing of a coffin. "Gun!" an agent shouted, drawing Harlan's service weapon from its holster. "Subject secured." The helicopter climbed into a holding pattern, the deafening roar easing to a dull thrum. The bright spotlight remained, bathing the scene in harsh, unforgiving relief. Only then did the front door of the lead Suburban open. A tall man in a suit, wearing a windbreaker emblazoned with DOJ on the collar, stepped out. This was Assistant Special Agent in Charge Marcus Hale. He did not run. He walked with the heavy, terrifying purpose of a man whose dinner had been interrupted by a threat to one of his own. He strode past Harlan, stepping over the prone officer as if he were a bag of garbage, and headed straight for Naomi's Tahoe. Naomi Brooks opened her door and stepped out. She still held her phone. She looked tired, but unharmed. She holstered her weapon and smoothed her hoodie. "You all right, Brooks?" Hale asked, voice low. "I am fine, Marcus," she replied. She pointed at Harlan, who was currently trying to twist his head out of the mud to see what was happening. "He did not breach the vehicle, but he drew on me. Full intent. Refused to acknowledge credentials." Hale turned slowly to look at Harlan. The expression on his face was pure, absolute disgust. "Get him up," Hale ordered the tactical team. The agents hauled Harlan to his feet. He was soaked, mud streaked across his uniform, his face flushed with a mixture of exertion and humiliation. "You cannot do this," he stammered, finding his voice. "I am a sworn peace officer. This is kidnapping. I want my union rep. I want Sheriff Whitaker." Naomi Brooks stepped closer. She stopped 2 feet away, just out of headbutt range. She looked him up and down, her expression unreadable. "You wanted to check my identification, Harlan," she said softly. She reached into her back pocket and pulled out the gold shield again. She held it steady and clear under the lights. "Special Agent Naomi Brooks," she read. "And you are currently under arrest for assault with a dangerous weapon on a federal officer, deprivation of rights under color of law, and unlawful detention. You have the right to remain silent. I strongly suggest you use it." Harlan stared at the badge. Reality finally crashed over him. The civilian he had planned to terrorize. The girl he had laughed at. She was the woman who held the keys to his life. "This is a mistake," he whispered, his eyes darting around the circle of armed federal agents. "The sheriff. He will not let you take me." Naomi signaled the agents. "Put him in the transport. We are going to his house." Harlan panicked. "Why are we going to my house?" "No." Naomi corrected him, a small, icy smile touching her lips. "Not your house. I mean your station. We are going to the Jericho County Sheriff's Department. I think it is time we had a talk with that sheriff of yours." The agents shoved Harlan into the back of one of the Suburbans. The heavy door slammed shut, sealing him inside a cage much smaller and far harder than the one in his own patrol car. The FBI caravan rolled into the parking lot of the Jericho County Sheriff's Department like a funeral procession for a king who did not yet know he was dead. The station was a low brick building from the 70s, surrounded by a chain-link fence topped with razor wire. It was the heart of Sheriff Royce, Big Jim, Whitaker's personal empire. For years, Whitaker had run this county like his own fiefdom. He decided who got charged, who got fined, and who disappeared. The lights in the station were still burning. Harlan's frantic radio call just before his arrest had undoubtedly triggered an alert. As the SUV stopped, the front doors of the station burst open. Sheriff Whitaker stormed out, flanked by 6 deputies. Whitaker was a colossus with a belly straining his beige uniform and a white Stetson hat that cost more than most people's cars. A cigar clenched between his teeth and a shotgun held casually in the crook of his elbow. He surveyed the black SUVs, the federal plates, and the tactical agents pouring out. He did not look afraid. He looked annoyed. "What the hell is all this circus?" Whitaker boomed, his voice echoing across the lot. "Boys, you are a long way from Quantico. Who is in charge here?" Naomi Brooks stepped out of the second vehicle. She had slipped on her FBI windbreaker now, the bold yellow letters visible against the navy. She walked to the front of the line, flanked by ASAC Marcus Hale and 2 agents carrying MP5s. "I am," she said. Whitaker looked at her. He narrowed his eyes, taking in the black woman in the windbreaker. He let out a laugh, glancing at his deputies. "You have got to be kidding me. You are the one Harlan called about. The impersonator. I am Special Agent Naomi Brooks," she repeated, ignoring his tone. "And we have your officer, Vance Harlan, in custody." "You do not have anyone in custody in my county unless I say so," Whitaker spat, taking a step forward. He rested a hand near the trigger guard of his shotgun. It was a subtle threat, but a threat nonetheless. "Now release my deputy and get these vehicles out of my lot before I arrest every last one of you for obstructing justice." The tension in the air was thick enough to choke on. The local deputies had their hands on their holsters. The FBI agents kept their rifles at low ready. It was a standoff, a pure Old West showdown in the heart of Georgia. Naomi did not blink. She stepped closer to Whitaker, invading his personal space. "Sheriff," she said, her voice quiet but carrying clearly, "I do not think you understand the gravity of the situation. We have dashcam footage of your officer drawing his weapon on me without cause. We have him on audio refusing to acknowledge federal credentials, and we have proof he attempted an unlawful arrest." "Harlan is a good boy," Whitaker dismissed. "He is aggressive. That is what we need out there. Maybe you were driving erratically. Maybe you looked suspicious. That was his call, not yours." "It is not his call anymore," Hale interrupted, stepping up beside Naomi. "Sheriff, this is now a federal investigation under Title 18, Section 242. If you interfere, you become a co-conspirator, and looking at this reception," Hale glanced at the shotgun, "I would say you are bordering on conspiracy." Whitaker's face turned a deep purple. "You threatening me, boy? I am the elected official of this county, and I represent the United States Department of Justice," Hale replied. "And right now, your election does not mean a damn thing." Suddenly, the rear door of the lead Suburban opened. 2 agents dragged Harlan out. He was still handcuffed, disheveled, and terrified. "Sheriff!" Harlan screamed when he saw his boss. "Sheriff, tell them who I am. Get these cuffs off me." Whitaker looked at Harlan. He saw the fear in his deputy's eyes. He saw the absolute dominance of federal force arrayed against him. Whitaker was corrupt, but he was not stupid. He could count, and he knew fighting the FBI on his own doorstep was a war he would lose. Whitaker's eyes narrowed. He looked at Naomi, then back at Harlan. The calculation took seconds. Save the deputy and sink the ship, or cut the branch to save the body. Whitaker slowly lowered the shotgun, removed the cigar from his mouth, and spat on the asphalt. "Harlan!" Whitaker said in a flat voice. "Jim, please!" Harlan begged. "They set me up." "Shut up, Vance," Whitaker said. He turned to Naomi. "You say you have 4K video?" Naomi lied smoothly. It was only 1080p, but Whitaker did not know that. "Audio and visual crystal clear." Whitaker nodded. He looked at his deputies. "You boys stand down?" The deputies hesitated. Then slowly they removed their hands from their weapons. The air seemed to leave the parking lot. "You want to process him?" Whitaker asked Naomi, his tone shifting from aggression to cold, bureaucratic negotiation. "You can use interrogation room B, but I want my lawyer present, and I want a copy of that tape." "You will get a copy when the United States Attorney deems it appropriate," Naomi said. "And as for the lawyer, Harlan can call whoever he wants. But we keep the room, we keep his locker, and we keep his records." "His locker." Whitaker tensed. "Everything," Naomi said. "Unless you have something to hide, Sheriff." Whitaker glared at her with pure hatred in his eyes. He knew what was in Harlan's locker. He knew what kind of souvenirs Harlan kept. If they opened that locker, Harlan would not be the only one to fall. It would start a fire that would burn the entire department down. But he could not stop it, not with 20 federal agents watching. "Do what you want," Whitaker growled. He turned and walked back into the station. The doors closed behind him. Naomi turned to Hale. "He is scared." "He should be," Hale said. "Let us go inside. I want to hear what Harlan has to say when he is not holding a gun." Interrogation room B was a claustrophobic box painted in a depressing institutional beige. It smelled of stale coffee and fear. A single one-way mirror dominated one wall. Vance Harlan sat at the metal table, his hands cuffed to the steel bar anchored to the floor. They had taken his belt, his shoelaces, and his badge. Without the uniform and the gun, he looked smaller. Without the uniform and the gun, he was just a man with a bad haircut and a trembling lower lip. Naomi Brooks stood in one corner, leaning against the wall, watching him. ASAC Marcus Hale sat across from Harlan. A closed folder rested on the table between them. "I know my rights," Harlan muttered, staring at the table. "I did nothing wrong. I initiated a traffic stop. The suspect did not cooperate. I followed protocol." "Protocol?" Hale repeated the word as if it tasted bad. "Is that what you call drawing a loaded weapon on a compliant driver? She was not complying. She was reaching for something." Harlan snapped, looking up. "She admitted she had a gun. She identified herself as a federal agent." Hale corrected. "She offered credentials. You laughed at them. You thought they were fake. You know how many fakes there are. So just because of a suspected fake identification, lethal force?" Hale asked calmly. Harlan fell silent. He was cornered, but he clung to the belief that his version could still prevail. "It is my word against hers," he thought. "Maybe the camera angle is bad. Maybe the audio did not catch everything." The door opened. Agent Hayes, a tech specialist, entered carrying a laptop. He set it on the table in front of Harlan. "We have recovered the footage from Agent Brooks's Blackview cloud server," Hayes said. "And we have also recovered the footage from your dashcam, Harlan. Remarkably, your body camera happened to be malfunctioning at that exact moment. Convenient, right?" Harlan swallowed hard. "Let us watch a movie," Naomi said from the corner. Hayes hit play. The screen showed a split view. The forward view displayed the empty road, Naomi's perfect lane discipline, no swerving, no crossing the yellow line. The interior view showed Naomi, calm. Her hands were on the wheel. Then the lights flashed. Harlan saw himself approaching the car. He heard his own voice, dripping with unprovoked aggression. "You expect me to believe a girl like you owns a vehicle like this?" Harlan flinched at the audio. It sounded worse in the silent room. It sounded racist. It sounded hateful. Then the gun appeared on screen. Naomi's hands were clearly visible. She was not reaching for anything. She was surrendering, and Harlan looked like a maniac. He was screaming, shaking, escalating a situation that now clearly did not exist. "I don't care about your fake credentials." The video ended. The silence in the room was deafening. "That," Hale said, pointing at the screen, "is 20 years minimum. Kidnapping, aggravated assault, civil rights violations." Harlan's face went pale. He was under enormous stress. "My divorce. I didn't mean—" "It is over," Naomi said, pushing off the wall. She walked to the table. "That video is bad, Harlan, but it is not the worst part." Harlan looked at her. "What?" Naomi placed a cardboard evidence box on the table. She lifted the lid. Inside were 7 driver's licenses. All belonged to women. All were black or Hispanic. "We opened your locker, Vance," Naomi said, lowering her voice to a whisper. "Sheriff Whitaker tried to stop us. But we got a warrant signed by a federal judge in Atlanta about 10 minutes ago." Harlan stopped breathing. "Who are these women?" Naomi asked, picking up one of the licenses. "Maya Johnson, stopped 3 months ago on the highway. No criminal record, no ticket. But you kept her license. Why?" She picked up another. "Elena Rodriguez, stopped 6 months ago. Same story. You kept the identification." Naomi leaned in close, her eyes locked on his. "We called Maya Johnson on the way here, Vance. You know what she said? She said you told her if she did you a favor, you would not take her to jail for the methamphetamine you claimed to find in her car. Methamphetamine that was not hers." Harlan began to shake violently. The defiance was gone. The arrogance was ashes. "That is a lie," he croaked. "We have 7 identifications," Hale said. "That is 7 witnesses, 7 victims. And now that we have you in custody, and now that they know the FBI is involved, they are going to talk. They are going to tell us everything." Naomi slammed her hand on the table, making Harlan jump. "You were not just a bad cop, Harlan. You were a predator. You used that badge to hunt women. You used that highway as your personal trap. And tonight you caught the wrong prey." Harlan stared at the evidence box, stared at the laptop screen where his career had just died, and realized Sheriff Whitaker was not going to save him. Whitaker was probably shredding documents right now to save himself. Harlan buried his face in his hands and began to sob. It was not a cry of remorse. It was the pathetic, selfish cry of a bully who had finally been hit back. "I want a deal. I will talk. Please. Can I give you Whitaker? Can I give you the department? Just do not put me in general population. Please." Naomi straightened, looking down at him with not the slightest shred of sympathy. "You will get whatever deal the United States attorney offers," she said. "But Harlan, you are going to prison, and everyone inside is going to know exactly what kind of cop you were." She turned to Hale. "I am done with him. Process him." As Naomi left the interrogation room, leaving the sobbing man behind, she felt the exhaustion finally catch up with her, but she also felt lighter. She stepped into the station's bullpen. The atmosphere had changed. The deputies who had been aggressive in the parking lot now sat at their desks with their heads down, pretending to work. They avoided eye contact. They knew the castle had been stormed. Naomi saw Sheriff Whitaker in his glass office. He was on the phone, looking frantic. He saw Naomi watching him. He stopped talking. Naomi held his gaze. She raised 2 fingers to her eyes, then pointed at him. "I see you." It was not over. Harlan was only the first domino. The dawn broke over Jericho County with a gray, somber light. The rain had finally stopped, leaving the world slick and cold. Inside the Federal Detention Center in Atlanta, Officer Vance Harlan was no longer the swaggering tyrant of the highway. He was inmate number whatever, and he talked fast enough to choke on his own words. The deal had been simple. Total transparency in exchange for safety. If Harlan wanted to avoid being thrown into general population in a maximum security penitentiary immediately, a death sentence for a dirty cop, he had to give up the king. Naomi Brooks sat behind the glass in the observation room with her arms crossed, listening to the audio feed. Beside her, Hale took notes. "Whitaker runs the impound lot," Harlan stammered, his hands trembling as he held a styrofoam cup of water. "Every car we seize, if it has cash, drugs or guns, it does not go to evidence. It goes to the overflow lot on County Road 9 for the sheriff's brother-in-law. He dismantles the cars, we split the cash. The drugs, Whitaker sells back to the traffickers in the next county." The federal prosecutor, a sharp-eyed woman named Sarah Jenkins, leaned forward. "And the women, Vance? The licenses in your locker?" Harlan shuddered. "That was just me. Whitaker knew. He knew I liked picking drivers. He told me as long as I did not stop anyone local who voted for him, he did not care what I did to the transients. What happens on the asphalt stays on the asphalt, he used to say." Naomi felt a wave of nausea, but pushed it down. This was the revelation. It was not just corruption. It was a systemic machine of predation. "We have enough for a RICO predicate," Hale murmured. "Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act. We can dismantle the entire department." "Let us go get him," Naomi said, turning toward the door. Early that morning, Sheriff Royce Big Jim Whitaker was at his ranch, a sprawling property bought on a cop's salary that somehow included a climate-controlled stable and a private lake. He was in his study, frantically feeding documents into a high-capacity shredder. He knew Harlan would fold. He knew the feds were coming. He just needed to destroy the ledger, the little black notebook where he recorded the bribes. He heard the crunch of gravel on his driveway. He paused, expecting to hear sirens. There were no sirens. Whitaker walked to the window and peered through the blinds. His blood ran cold. It was not just a patrol car, it was an armada. An FBI Bearcat armored vehicle was smashing through his front gate, ripping the wrought iron off its hinges. Behind it, a dozen SUVs tore across the lawn. "FBI, search warrant, come out with your hands up." The voice on the loudspeaker was deafening. Whitaker looked at the shredder, looked at the shotgun on his wall, and realized it was over. The empire he had built on intimidation and silence had crumbled in less than 12 hours. All because one of his thugs had picked a fight with the wrong woman. He opened the front door. Naomi Brooks stood behind the lead tactical officer's ballistic shield. This time she was not wearing a hoodie. She wore full tactical gear, her badge prominently displayed on her chest. Whitaker stepped out with his hands raised. He looked defeated, old and small. "Sheriff Royce Whitaker," Naomi announced, her voice ringing in the quiet morning. "You are under arrest for conspiracy, money laundering, drug trafficking, and obstruction of justice." As the agents cuffed him, Whitaker looked at Naomi. "You think you have won?" he spat, trying to salvage one last shred of dignity. "You think this changes anything? There is always another Harlan. There is always another me." Naomi stepped closer, looking him straight in the eyes. "Maybe," she said coldly, "but they will remember what happened to you, and they will think twice." She signaled the agents. "Get him out of here." As they dragged the sheriff away, Naomi looked past the house toward the garage. Agents were already prying open the doors of the luxury cars parked inside, cars bought with stolen money. Her phone vibrated. It was a text from the forensics team at the station. Subject: Harlan's dashcam archive. Message: we found more. We found the deleted files. We have 14 additional incidents. We are contacting the victims now. Naomi looked up at the sky. The sun was finally breaking through the clouds. Justice in the federal system is not a sprint. It is a slow, crushing grind. For the residents of Jericho County, the months that followed the arrests felt like a collective held breath, but when the exhale finally came, it shattered the ground. The cases of United States versus Vance Harlan and United States versus Royce Whittaker became a media spectacle nicknamed by the press the Jericho Purge. The federal courthouse in Atlanta was filled to capacity every day. The air inside smelled of floor wax and nervous sweat. In the front row of the gallery sat the survivors of Jericho. They were a silent wall of 11 women, including Maya Johnson and Elena Rodriguez, who had been terrorized, extorted, and humiliated by Harlan. They did not speak, they did not shout, they simply stared at the back of Harlan's head. Their presence was a heavy, suffocating weight on his conscience. On the final day of testimony, Special Agent Naomi Brooks took the stand. She was the embodiment of karma. When the prosecution played the dashcam footage, the courtroom fell into a tomb-like silence. On the giant monitors, the jury watched Officer Harlan laugh. They saw the cruelty in his eyes. They saw him draw a loaded gun on a woman's chest simply because he wanted to feel powerful. Harlan's defense attorney, a sweaty man in an ill-fitting suit, tried to paint the picture of a stressed public servant. He argued that Harlan suffered from post-traumatic stress, that he had made a split-second error in judgment in a high-crime area. The jury did not buy it for a second. When the jury foreperson stood to read the verdict, Harlan shook so violently that his handcuffs rattled against the defense table. On the charge of deprivation of rights under color of law, we find the defendant Vance Harlan guilty. On the charge of aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, guilty. On the charge of kidnapping, guilty. The guilty verdicts landed like hammer blows, 22 in total. Sheriff Royce, Big Jim Whittaker, suffered the same fate. The RICO charges stuck like glue. The jury determined he had turned the Jericho County Sheriff's Department into a criminal enterprise. The king of Jericho had been dethroned. Then came sentencing. The Honorable Arthur Wise, a federal judge known for his icy demeanor and zero tolerance for corruption, adjusted his glasses and looked at Harlan. Harlan sat in an orange jumpsuit with tears streaming down his face. He looked small. The bully was gone, replaced by a terrified boy. "Mr. Harlan," Judge Wise's voice boomed, echoing off the mahogany walls. "You were entrusted with a badge, a symbol of protection. Instead, you used it as a license to hunt. You did not just break the law, you shattered public trust. You preyed on the vulnerable because you thought no one was watching. You were wrong." Judge Wise paused, letting the weight of the moment settle. He sentenced Vance Harlan to 22 years in federal prison with no possibility of parole. Royce Whittaker, for his role as the architect of this corruption, received a life sentence. When the gavel came down with one final resounding crack, Harlan looked toward the gallery. His eyes met Naomi Brooks's. She did not smile. She did not gloat. She simply gave him one slow nod, a final seal of closure. Hard karma. But the story did not end in the safety of the courtroom. The real karma, the hard and brutal payback of the universe, waited for Harlan inside the concrete belly of West Peachtree, a high-security federal penitentiary. Harlan knew what happened to cops in prison. He had begged his lawyer for protective custody. He had pleaded to be kept in the special housing unit, isolated from general population. It was his only chance of survival, but prisons are overcrowded, underfunded, and bureaucratic places. Papers get lost, files go missing, or maybe someone in processing simply saw the charges and decided to let fate run its course. Weeks after his sentencing, a guard opened the door to Harlan's isolation cell. "Pack your things, 4922, the guard growled. "You are being moved to Block D, general population." Harlan's blood ran cold. No, there is a mistake. I am a former officer. I have a separation order." "Computer says Block D," the guard said indifferently. "Move." Block D was a cavern of noise, shouts, the clang of steel on steel, the heavy thud of boots. As Harlan entered the cafeteria, the chatter seemed to die. Eyes followed him, predatory eyes. They smelled his fear the way sharks smell blood in the water. During mealtime, Harlan carried his tray. It rattled in his hands. He tried to make himself invisible, head down, searching for an empty table in the farthest corner. "Hey, Officer Harlan!" A voice cut through the air like the crack of a whip. Harlan froze. He knew that voice. He turned slowly. Sitting 10 feet away was Marcus "Bone" Williams. Harlan remembered him vividly. Years earlier, on a quiet afternoon, Harlan had planted a bag of cocaine in Williams' truck just to meet his monthly arrest quota. Williams had lost his job, his home, and 5 years of his life. Williams stood up. He was not smiling. He was massive, arms covered in tattoos, eyes burning with cold, patient hatred. The entire cafeteria seemed to go quiet. The other inmates at William's table rose, flanking him. In prison, news travels faster than light. Everyone knew the new guy was a dirty cop, a cop who preyed on women, a cop who planted evidence. Harlan dropped his tray. Mashed potatoes and green beans spilled across the linoleum. He stumbled backward, colliding with a corrections officer patrolling the aisle. Harlan grabbed the guard's arm, panic seizing his chest. "Help me!" he shrieked, pointing at Williams. "You have to help me. They are going to kill me." The guard stopped. He looked at Harlan's desperate, tear-streaked face. Then he looked at Marcus Williams. The guard and Williams exchanged a glance. A silent communication passed between them. The guard slowly peeled Harlan's fingers off his uniform. "I did not see anything," he muttered. Then he turned his back and walked out of the cafeteria, the heavy door clicking shut behind him. Harlan was left alone in the circle. Karma had not merely struck back. It had come to collect with interest. As the shadows of the men closed in around him, Harlan opened his mouth to scream, but in the concrete hell of Block D, no one was coming to save him. Later, the Georgia sun set, casting long golden shadows over the pines that lined the highway. The humidity had lifted, leaving the air crisp and clean. Naomi Brooks drove her convertible with the top down, the wind whipping through her hair. Today she was not in an official vehicle. She was in her own car, listening to jazz with her arm resting on the door. She slowed as she approached mile marker 44. The gravel shoulder was empty. The darkness that had once haunted this stretch of road was gone. The Jericho County Sheriff's Department had been formally dissolved, its territory absorbed by the neighboring county. The corrupt officers had been fired, and a new station had been established with strict federal oversight and mandatory body camera policies. Naomi touched the gold badge clipped to her belt. She had recently been promoted to special agent in charge of the entire Atlanta division. She looked at the empty spot where Harlan had once tried to destroy her. She thought of him rotting in a cell, living the nightmare he had created for so many others. She thought of Whitaker, staring at a blank wall for the rest of his natural life. And then she thought of the women, Maya, Eleanor, and the countless others, who could now drive this road at night without fear. Naomi smiled. It was a smile of genuine peace. She shifted gears, the engine roaring with a sound of freedom and power, and accelerated toward the horizon. The road ahead was finally clear. And this is the incredible true story of how a corrupt cop chose the absolute wrong target and paid the ultimate price. It is a chilling reminder that power reveals who a person truly is, but it also proves that no badge shines bright enough to hide the truth forever. Officer Harlan thought he was the law, but he learned the hard way that there is always a bigger fish. If this story made your heart race, make sure to hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. What do you think about the sentence Harlan received? Were 22 years enough, or did he deserve more? Let me know in the comments below. Right? Justice served. If you are glad they got him, do not forget to subscribe and tap the bell so you never miss a new story of instant karma, law enforcement takedowns, and dramatic twists. Thanks for watching and stay safe out there. Yeah.